I'm not sure if it's the expectations of living up to last season, which in my estimation was a tad bit overrated, or it's the actual work, or it's some kind of grudge that people have, in particular critics, against the showrunner. But this season of True Detective has been polarizing. It seems that people either love it or they hate it, or they love and hate it at the same exact time. For me, this particular episode exemplified that polarization because I enjoyed it. Like 10 out of 10 enjoyed it when I watched it. But then when I read the reviews and I read online reaction on Twitter and Facebook, people really seemed to be trashing it. Well, there were some people that loved it, of course, but a lot of people didn't like it. And for what I've seen this season, it was the best episode by far. I mean, the characters were outlined more clearly than they had been all season long. And I think I have a pretty good and very critical eye for television shows. I think my palate for good TV and good writing is pretty good. And I have been very critical of this season. It's been very uneven, in particular with the character motivations, the dialogue, and even the logic of the characters and why they do things and why especially supporting characters, how the supporting characters react to the main characters, in particular Frank. But ultimately, for me, the test is, do I still want to watch this show? When I see the opening credits, when they show me the recap from last week, or they recap or refresh the storylines that they're going to cover in that particular episode, am I still excited? And before this episode, I was still excited because we had the confrontation that we had in the very beginning. Now, we have our two main characters, Ray and Frank, having coffee together. Of course, we're catching up from last week where Ray finally figured out or was told that Frank led him on a wild goose chase, ending up murdering someone other than the man who actually raped his wife. It was a good scene. There was great tension, but the underrated part was the camera work. Seeing both their hands on the table with the gun, one hand on the table, the points that Frank made to Ray that, hey, I'm not the one that made you do this. This was already in you, and you would have done this regardless of whether I gave you the name or not. I thought it was good. On some level, I think they still want us to like Frank. Otherwise, Frank would have been responsible for it. And I guess it remains to be seen whether or not Frank is lying to Ray in this particular situation. But I thought it was a good scene. Maybe one of the best scenes that we've seen so far this season. Then, of course, you get Ray's reaction. And Ray's story this episode, I thought was particularly strong. We got to see his motivations. We got to see his pain. In a lot of ways, True Detective Season 1 was an elevation of masculinity. It was showing you how hard it was to be a man and how these men struggled through it. But at the same time, it was a glorification. It was an elevation of masculinity. In a lot of ways, this season has been the opposite, especially in the case of Ray. He's unable, the manly thought of natural law, being able to protect your wife and children. He's estranged from his child as a father, as a husband. He's failed his duties to protect, and he can't handle it. And it was just great acting by Colin Farrell, even though his character, I guess maybe we're supposed to take sympathy in him, but I just don't like Ray. He seems irredeemable at this point. If we shift over to Frank, I like what they're doing with Frank finally. They've kind of given him something to do because him trying to go around town and reclaim his old territory, to me, it felt false. It got a little old and it got a little repetitive. It's like Frank's like, hey, I'm coming back. I want the business back, or you're going to have to give me a cut now. And basically, after about a line or two, all of his opposition would say, okay, Frank, we're going to do it now. So all of that felt a little false to me. But giving him something to do, a journey to take to find the hard drive, is good. And then he actually faced real opposition. And we got the great line, and I'm paraphrasing, cross that off my bucket list, a Mexican standoff with actual Mexicans. I really enjoyed some of the humor. We need characters that face real opposition. And in my estimation, outside that fight that he pretty much easily won, Frank didn't have much opposition. He didn't have a lot of conflict or resistance. He's trying to find what's going on with Ben Casper and who killed him, which is where his money is, but he still is not having enough conflict or fight back that you want to see in a character. So well done. Vince Vaughn's acting, I thought, was on point this episode. And then we finally get to Annie, and that's where the show shined the most for me. Her character arc, how damaged she was. We saw why she was damaged this episode. We also got a chance to see the knife in action. One of the good things about television, or movies too, is you have setups and you have payoffs. We've been set up for the knife thing from the very first episode about her saying why she carries knives, and we saw that. We even had the great scene where Paul tried to play with her knife and she gave him the evil eye, and finally we get to see the knife in action. We get to see her go through horror. It was just well done in my estimation. It almost got to Scooby-Doo level when you had Paul and Ray trying to sneak in to save her. But overall, I thought it was good. I think the critics are overly harsh. Just because the show has an orgy scene doesn't make it automatically bad. And that's what they're trying to say. I'd give this episode of True Detective a 9 out of 10. I thought it was really good, especially the Annie stuff and them teasing different things about her character, and then we getting the payoff on that particular night. Also moving the plot forward by finding the girl. It was just a very good episode, and screw the rest of the critics, even though, I have issues with the season at large, but very good episode.